Thanks, everyone. Yes, so rolling your own rank tracking solution. I'll just skip this. You guys heard about me already. Cool. So what is the problem with most rank tracking solutions today? You run into the issue that pretty much you're locked into this big platform with its own data. Doesn't allow for a lot of customizability. You need a new feature, and you're sort of like locked into that. You need to go to a different vendor if you need a different feature, or you get them to create it, which is unlikely. All the data exists in silos. For the most part, you're getting rank tracking data. You may like export it or dump that to a SQL database, and like maybe you want to do an analysis. You're exporting it, doing the analysis there. It's not fully baked into the platform unless the platform made it that analysis ready available for you. So there's some clear advantages to running your own rank tracking software like Rankenberry. So you get full data control. Everything sits within one platform. All your data that you're going to use for analysis, all the rank tracking data, anything else that you're pulling in that you want to mix with that data, it's all available all in one for you to use end to end. If a feature doesn't exist, you want that feature, you can make it yourself. Again, you don't have to switch to a different data provider or different rank tracking software. You can go ahead and just add on that functionality if you need it. Lastly, Rankenberry is an open source project, which means beyond this being a one-man show, if you want to contribute and help others, you're surely able to do that. So to get started, like I said, it's an open source project. It's available on a GitHub repo. Feel free to clone that repo and run it yourself or contribute to it. Whatever you want, it's up to you. I'll just put this front first. Right now it's running off of a rank tracking API called SpaceSerp, which has this lifetime deal on AppSumo. It's started as the API first before I decided to build a rank tracker. That's the genesis of this. I got a really good deal on a rank tracking API and I built software around it. But if you want to actually try the project, you will need access to SpaceSerp first. It's like $60 for life. It's not bad. Cool. So talking about the architecture of Rankenberry. Oh, before I do this, let me just say, I had this really ambitious roadmap for Rankenberry. Like I wanted to have all these features done before this conference, and I didn't get to it. So what did I do? I tried using some AI software. I used Cursor to try to build out features. Total nightmare. Like it made some features and it introduced tenfold the amount of bugs, and I spent like 2 weeks trying to rectify the bugs before I decided to just revert and code most of it myself.
So you became a 10x programmer?
Yeah, 10x minus, I don't know. It was miserable. But the one advantage it did have is it helped me generate these architecture graphs. So there's some purposes for the AI software today. So how does Rankenberry work? So the back end is written in Python using Fast API as the library. The front end is Vue.js, Vue 3. Fastend facilitates reading and writing from 3 APIs right now, that being the rank tracking API that I mentioned, SpaceSerp, grepwords for search volume, and Google Search Console API for some other data magic. And everything is dumped to a SQL database, SQLite in this case. Why use Python for rank tracking when it's not the fastest or necessarily the best? Because Python has emerged as the language for data work. It's primarily what machine learning engineers use. It's what data scientists use nowadays, except for like a small offshoot of people that are still using like R or something like that, or baked into like a Java framework. But data science pretty much reigns supreme with Python, which means that Rankin-Berry is really well set up for the future data analysis work that you're ultimately going to want to do with this platform. Like, I don't know anyone who does rank tracking and just like looks at the data and that's it. Like, either you might report on it to some executives, but like you ultimately want to do something with that data, do some sort of analysis, and having Python sort of like baked into that pipeline already is a real advantage in my opinion. Okay. So let's talk about Fast API. Fast API again is the library that powers the bulk of the backend. It was the first time I had ever used Fast API, so it was a good experience. I'd used things like Flask and Django in the past, and Fast API really sort of builds itself more as like for writing APIs, but it makes a really great backend for various reasons. One, it runs everything as an endpoint, which is really cool for modularity. Becomes the center for it. It manages things asynchronously, so if you're using an asynchronous front-end framework like a React or a Vue, you might as well have your backend run asynchronously. And it's just a really fun coding experience, honestly. I really like how you define like endpoints and the functions that serve under each of those endpoints. SQLite for local storage, honestly, this is not the best solution. It's really great for when I was doing development work and running everything locally, but ultimately, Rankin-Berry is going to need to move past that to something like Postgres when we want to handle like multi-user work. So that's something to be upgraded. Mentioned this already, so external APIs that it's pulling in from is that SpaceSerp API for rank tracking data. Google Search Console, which is pulling in stuff like clicks and impressions and click-through rate, grep words for search volume. And just as Fast API is serving up the endpoints, it's helping facilitate the ingestion of data as well. So I'll just mention this quickly. One of the really nice advantages, and this isn't sort of built in yet, is with Fast API, is that it automatically generates API documents. So if you build your application around Fast API, if you go to the API endpoint and just append /docs to it, it will generate robust API documentation. So all you have to do once this is like in multi-user mode is do some like API key management, and you've given your clients or the people that are working with you a fully functional API built on top of your rank tracking platform. Okay, let's talk about front end for a bit. I mentioned this. Vue.js is a modern front end JavaScript framework, much like a React. I've been a big fan of Vue for a while now. I think it's starting to gain more traction nowadays, but that remains to be seen. So just in terms of the construction, we have Vue.js, which runs with Vue Router that handles the routing, so the different URLs that it creates. And of course, with most modern JavaScript frameworks, those different routes are making use of various components that can be used sort of to modularly create pages. And that's all communicating via the Pinia store, which I'll get back to, and the various API services, and eventually back to Fast API for the backend. Instead of trying for me to sell you on Vue, I'm going to let Vue sell you on Vue. Play this.
Under the hood, Vue has a refined reactivity system combined with declarative rendering. This means Vue does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Because Vue is a progressive framework, you can start with the core library and add on the pieces you need from its interconnected ecosystem, featuring its own router, state management solutions, testing utilities, a CLI, and more. Vue is designed to pair well with other popular technologies like TypeScript, giving you and your team the flexibility to use Vue how it best fits your workflow. Its fine-tuned design prevents your components from over-rendering, keeping your app performant as it scales. Instead of having to manually optimize your code, Vue takes your code and intelligently optimizes it for you as it compiles, so you'll render fast and stay fast. Vue Vue gives you back the freedom to focus on getting creative and staying productive, enjoying the development process again. By choosing Vue, you're investing in a technology that is invested in you.
By choosing Rankenberry, you're investing in technology that's invested in you. So one of the things I really like about Vue is it's like a progressive framework, so you can start very, very small. You can literally like embed a line of JavaScript from like a CDN and make a very, very small application without dealing with like the terminal at all, or you can scale that up and build a very large application like Rankenberry and pull in like different more advanced components to Vue. So learning curve wise, it's really phenomenal. I feel like no one talks about these little things when they give presentations, so it might be fun to touch on things like Vite. So Vite is sort of this alternative to like a Webpack or something like that. And it handles the bundling of all the JavaScript. So you get really like efficient code running. But it actually skips the bundling when you're in development mode, so you can do development work a little bit faster. It also has something called hot module replacement, or HMR. So if you make like a small changement to that code, it just loads that code instead of the entire script. Again, speed. And when it's time to put the JavaScript into production, it bundles it just as like a Webpack would. And modern, at least in Vue 3, Pina is the go-to state management for Vue. So you can sort of think about this as like a centralized way of like handling a lot of like the more complex JavaScript code. Instead of each like component handling individual like functions, Pina will handle that for you. So when an application starts to get more complex, you'll probably want to introduce something like Pina, and that's what Rankenberry did. And it plays very well with Vite, which we just talked about. Okay, so enough about how it functions. Let's talk about the actual functionality of Rankenberry itself. This is sort of like the main view of Rankenberry if you're thinking about running it yourself. You have this rank table. It shows you the date for which the data was pulled in, the keyword, the project or domain, the rank that got pulled in from SpaceSerp, an estimated business impact, which I'll come back to, search volume, rank change since you last pulled in the data, GSC data, so on and so forth. We have scheduling and on-demand fetches, so you can choose whenever you want to just like fetch new ranking data from SpaceSerp, or you can schedule it to pull hourly or daily or monthly, however much you want. And that's handled, I'll come back to that. Has a tag management system, so you can look at a subset of your data, whether that's across multiple projects or within a single project. And it provides summary data by those domain/project or tag. And it also generates really neat share of voice data across the SERP. So what does that look like? So this is the scheduling functionality. You select the frequency, the project that it's applicable to, and the tag, and you just schedule it. And I should say that's all handled asynchronously, so it's not blocking the main application, so you can continue to like browse the data without getting frozen and unable to use it. That's how you apply tags. This is the summary data for a particular tag for a different various date range. And this is the share of voice view. You can see there's a time series data where you can see the top 10 results, and then a little donut chart below that, so you can see how the distribution looks. And below that, there's actually a table with the different percentages. Google Search Console. So it's going to ingest Google Search Console for the keywords that you're ranking for, that you're pulling in rank data for, which actually enables things like a business impact analysis. So it's all fun and good. Rank goes up, that sounds good. Rank goes down, that sounds bad. But what does that actually mean in terms of like revenue, in terms of like business value? I want to know what that is. So the business impact analysis helps you calculate that. So it calculates the click-through rate for each position using Google Search Console data. So you know what your actual click-through rate curve is for your website. And you can give it like an average conversion rate and conversion rate value. So it will actually calculate if my website went down a certain amount, like what is the actual impact on revenue. Time series views. Pulling in top 100 results for all the keywords, which isn't totally useful right now, but will become more useful as we add more features. So it's a little bit forward thinking. So here's an example of the estimated impact. You can see that's like the fifth column with the dollar amount. So here we have the rank change went up 23 positions. So that added $245 of revenue for my website. And that's how you you're going to authenticate with Google Search Console. It will start ingesting it. You'll dictate the conversion rates and whatnot in the configuration, and it'll start producing that data. This is the time series data, so you can see what things look like over time. Also super important is when you do these sort of time series charts to make sure if there are gaps in your data to not like continue the line. You want to actually see those gaps so it's not misleading. So it does that pretty well. Top 100 results. And you can't see it on the screen, but it pulls in like stuff like the meta descriptions that are shown in the SERP and whatnot. Okay, so let's take a break for a second and talk about some challenges and limitations of ranked and buried today. So we've talked about this a few times, but it's relying on this API called Space SERP right now. Space SERP is really, really cheap, but it's certainly not the best rank tracking API out there. It has no features like what are the featured snippets or AI overviews or general SERP features. It's really not ingesting any of that data. And it's a single API provider. Right now, the rank and bury is only set up to use Space SERP, and we hope to change that in the future so people have different options. So yeah, we'll introduce other API providers. Used to use SERP API over at Shopify. It's great, and I've heard a lot of people ask about SERPer and Value SERP, which has like pay-as-you-go pricing. People really like that. So that's definitely on the roadmap. And we talked about SQLite being a limitation. So SQLite produces a flat file in your directory. It's not the most secure. It's not really set up for multiple users well. So we're going to want to move off of SQLite eventually into something like Postgres. Right now, like I said, there was a bunch of features I wanted to get to, but as like a solo creator who has another job, like that didn't happen. So the open source architecture is really important. Like, people contributing to it can definitely make it better. And another limitation, depends on how you look at it, is there's no Google Data Studio built into this. So any sort of like chart customations is a manual effort. All right, talk about open source and scaling. So yeah, it's just me. Every bug I squash is like another week. So open source really helps. Submit bug reports and feature requests into the GitHub repo. That'll really help. Heck, create your own branch and do a pull request. And hopefully we'll create a self-sustaining community. I feel like people don't talk about licensing when they talk about open source enough. That's a really important part of open source. So I went with a GPL 3, which they consider a strong copyleft license. Basically what this says is it's an open source project. You can customize it, use it however you want. You can run a commercial product off of it. But by law, you have to link back to the source code. So that helps reinforce that that it is an open source project, that the development is dependent on others. So even if people are paying for it off an instance that they ran themselves, like you should be contributing back to the project. Now I'm going to talk through all the features that I expected to have done that I didn't have done in time. And I blame AI for that. It under-promised, over-promised. Algorithm update overlays. So you have click data from Google Search Console. You have ranking data. Why not layer in if there was a Google update? Google has a JSON endpoint that has all the algorithm updates listed out, when they started, when they ended. So you should be able to overlay that data and see, is your ranking decline due to an algorithm update, or are you just really bad at SEO? In the same vein, anomaly detection. You can do something very simple with like a z-score. If something falls out of like the z-score bound, like maybe that's due to like an algorithm update because like Google's changing things and things are like going up and down a whole bunch, and or maybe it's just a very like intermittent rank change and like it's going to correct itself the next day. So knowing whether that something is an anomaly or like the status quo is really, really helpful. We already have the data on this, so we might as well implement it. Forecasting. So since we're using Python, it's very easy to integrate something like Facebook Profit, which facilitates, time series forecasting and projections very easily. So you can have an idea of, based on your historic data, will my data continue to go up or down, and by what magnitude? Keyword clustering. So we talked about the importance for future work of having the full 100 results ingested into Rank and Berry. And that's because it's really, really good way to handle keyword clustering. There's a bunch of different methods that look at basically the crossover of URLs between keywords. Look at the URLs where you like actually ingest the keywords and look at the thematic contents of that. And sort of assess how keywords should be grouped together by topic rather than individual keywords. And that also enables really fantastic analysis. We talked about this. Going to have to move to Postgres. We're also going to need authentication. Right now this is running locally and there's absolutely no sense of users or authentication. This is not set up for a commercial application currently. That's got to change sooner rather than later. And that's it. That's Rank and Berry. I would love for you to try it out and contribute to it. Feel free to clone the root repo and give it a try. Thank you.